Okay, in this video we're going to have a quick explanation, very simple explanation of international trade. That is, whether a country, say Australia, imports or exports a particular kind of product. We're going to use the demand-supply model for a domestic market. So we're going to be therefore implicitly assuming that this domestic market or industry is perfectly competitive, which is obviously pretty unrealistic. But nonetheless, we're going to use it as an illustrative tool to at least get a grip on the idea of why importing or exporting may occur. So we're going to assume here that all the Australian industries that we'll talk about, or the domestic market that we talk about, are price takers in the world. That is, they don't get to control the world price of the particular product that we might be looking at. They simply have to accept the world price, whatever it is. We're also going to assume that there's no government intervention involved other than the government enforcing property rights. So by this simple demand-supply model, we can try to explain why importing and exporting occurs. The key question ends up being, what's the world price of the good in question relative to the domestic price of the good in question? And we'll see that if the world price of the product is less than the domestic equilibrium price of the product, then importing will occur. And we'll also see that if, on the other hand, the world price of the product is greater than the domestic equilibrium price, then exporting will occur. So let's look at that graphically. So what can motivate the importation of cars into Australia? Well, this crucially depends on the idea that the world price of cars, the price you can buy cars at on the world market, is less than the domestic equilibrium price of cars, that is, cars that are produced domestically. So if we were just looking at the domestic car market by itself, independent of the rest of the world, we shut ourselves away, then we've got the demand for cars and the supply of cars, and we assume that the price and quantity gravitate to the equilibrium point, $24,000 and 2 million cars per year. Now, once we open our economy up to the world, it might turn out that the world price of cars is $15,000 per car, well below the domestic equilibrium price of 24. Now, as we assumed before, I'm going to say that Australia is a small player in the world market, so Australian producers and consumers are price takers. They simply accept the world price. Now, what will happen in that case is, assuming that you can allow the world price to dictate the price at which Australians can buy cars, then the price that Australians will pay will fall. And the quantity demanded of cars Australians will want to buy goes up from 2 million to 3 million. However, from the perspective of the producers, they are unwilling and unable to produce more than 1 million cars at this lower price, at this world price of $15,000 per car. It's not worth their while producing more than that. Okay, so how is this gap between the quantity that's domestically supplied and the quantity that's domestically demanded filled? Well, it's filled with imported cars. And so you get an increase from nothing to, in this case, 2 million imported cars into the marketplace. What about exports then? What could motivate exports? Well, in this case, if the world price of the particular product, say it's coal, in this case, if the world price of coal per tonne is greater than the domestic equilibrium price of coal, then this will motivate exports of coal. Let's say that the world price of coal is $75 per tonne, which is clearly greater than the domestic equilibrium price of coal at $50 per tonne. In this case, the coal producers are able to sell their product at the price of $75. They can sell it at the world price. In doing so, they're willing to expand production from 100 million tonnes per year to 175 million tonnes per year at that higher price. But domestic consumers, on the other hand, at that higher price, are not willing to purchase as much as they were before. The quantity demanded will contract from 100 million tonnes to 50 million tonnes. So they're not willing to pay the same. They're not willing to buy as much at that new higher world price, which they now have to pay. Well, now we can see we've got this quantity demanded domestically of 50 million tonnes, but the quantity supplied is 175 million tonnes. Does this mean that there is an oversupply in the marketplace? No, because the extra amount that's being produced, the extra 75 million tonnes being produced above the original equilibrium, is not going unsold. It's now being sold to people overseas or countries overseas. That is, this will be this shortfall or this gap between the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied will be exported overseas. So this is an explanation for why we would have the exporting of coal. It also helps to explain why the price of coal, which is charged domestically, is higher than would be the case if you had no trade whatsoever.